Good morning po mga kaibigan. We are still under Lecture 101, the Due Diligence Guides Before Buying a Real Property in the Philippines. Nandito pa rin tayo sa topic under Guide number 3, Know the Seller. Tapos ang subtopic po dito ngayon, itong very interesting question or issue always, no? Hiwalay sa asawa, paano ang proseso para makakuha ng marital consent sa transaksyon ng kanilang ari-arian. Kasi in most cases, pag maghiwalay, yung isa nag-abandon na, hindi na makita. Yung isa, gusto niya ibenta yung property. Kailangan ng marital consent. So, paano po yan? Ito yung tinatawag na separated in fact. And the problem is how to secure a marital consent. So, if later on, pag tapos ninyo nitong video na ito, nagustuhan nyo, huwag nyo namang kalimutan mag-subscribe at mag-like and share this one. No? At saka, pindutin nyo na rin yung notification bell para for later updates, ma-inform kayo. So, let us proceed. Guide number 3 is the seller married. The issue here is always marital consent. Kasi nga sabi natin, kapag mag-asawa sila at they have a property, ang presumption is that it is a conjugal property and both spouses must give their consent. Marital consent is always necessary when it comes to a married couple. So with sub-question issue number 5, married but separated in fact, you have to remember the following things. Marital consent is needed, of course, kahit hiwalay sila, if conjugal property under either absolute community of property or the conjugal partnership of gains. We discussed that already in our separate video. Now, marital consent not needed, alam natin ito. Number 1, if it is an excluded properties. We already discussed what are those excluded properties, like gratis transfers from the ancestors or the predecessors, wherein you receive properties through inheritance, mana, or donation, no? Excluded property yan. And of course, if there is a separation of property dun sa prenuptial agreement nila, hindi mo na kailangan ng marital consent kahit umalis pa yung isa. Basta as long as that is your property. Alright? Ibang usapan kung property niya, hindi mo pwede ibenta kay kanya yung sarili. And then, if you are married to a foreigner, tapos the foreigner absconds and hiniwalayan ka, there's no problem with the selling of the property because foreigners are prohibited to own real properties in the Philippines, except yung condominium units nga. Now, ang rule is that, problema kasi, in most cases, ayaw magbigay ng marital consent yung umalis. Either nang iinis or baka hindi na makita. Baka kasi nung iminabandon yung other spouse is that nag-hide siya or meron na siyang ibang kasama, meron na siyang bagong partner, and he doesn't want to be found. Kahit hanapin mo sa Facebook, mahirap talaga. And here is a property now that you intend to sell because kailangan ng support ng family. So ano po ba yung dapat mong gawin if you are in that kind of situation? Alright, so take note that the separation in fact of spouses does not affect the absolute community property or the conjugal property regime. General rule yan. So, kung kailangan talaga ng marital consent at needed talaga, the remedy is you have to secure what we call a judicial authorization. Ano ibig sabihin ng judicial authorization? Judicial from the word judiciary, you have to file a petition in court to get an authorization to sell the property if the consent of one spouse is required by law to any transaction. Like, for example, if prenda use as collateral or sell, kailangan man ng consent of the other spouse. It's required by law to any transaction. Tapos, kailangan ng judicial authorization through a summary hearing. Ano ibig sabihin ng summary hearing? So, let's say, the abandoned spouse, hindi yung abandoning spouse, yung abandoned spouse, file a petition in court and says that, Your Honor, I have to sell this property. This is conjugal property by us both spouses. Inabandon kami, hiniwalayan ako, meron na siya ibang partners, then I have to sell this because we have children. And it is needed para support the family. And the court may possibly allow that during that hearing, no? I-establish mo yung point na talagang iniwan ka, tapos may mga bata ka, tapos kailangan mo. But it always need a judicial authorization. Why? Because the court here will try to protect the family and the proceeds of that sale or the mortgage which you receive from getting that judicial authorization. Kasi baka mawaldas mo rin yung abandoned spouse, hindi rin right because merong mga children na dapat ding protektahan. So, may intervention talaga ng court in all transactions that will you do with the money that you will receive after securing a judicial authorization. Now, meron tayong additional punishment doon sa abandoning spouse, no? Number 1, punishment. Okay. The spouse who leaves the conjugal home or refuses to live therein without just cause, walang dahilan, shall have no right to be supported. Hindi ka pwede mag-demand ng support, iniwan mong pamilya mo. Tapos ngayon, maghingi ka ng support doon sa conjugal property. Let's say you have a conjugal property, nag-earn ng income sa rentals, fruits, either industrial, civil, or natural fruits. You cannot ask for support. Ikaw yung umalis Tsaka, ayaw mong tumira dito. Wala namang dahilan. Basta gusto mo lang, ayaw mo lang talaga. Unless merong just cause. Like, usually, the wife abandons the husband kapag binubugbog ng husband, or the other way around, yung wife, binubugbog yung husband. Ang may law lang that protect women's, yung bawsi, kapag binubugbog ng husband. Okay, psychological, physical, or emotional abuse. Pero wala pang batas po na kung ang lalaki ang binubugbog, no? ng wife. Alright, so shall have no right to be supported. Cut yung support. Ano pang additional punishment? Meron pa. Additional punishment, no? Dagdag na lang ito for your understanding. Yung separate properties of both spouses shall be solidarily liable for the support of the family if insufficient community property. Kasi remember that merong excluded properties, merong mga separate properties ang both spouses. Like sabi ko nga sa inyo, kapag excluded siya yung mana or under conjugal partnership of gains, dinala niya as a separate property. Now, ang una mo nang i-exhaust is yung community property, no? Nabenta na or na mortgage, tapos kulang pa rin to support the needs of the family, you go now to the separate properties of the spouses. So, you could now ask again for a judicial authorization. Pero, ang authorization na makukuha mo dito is this one. Judicial authorization to administer or encumber. So, ikaw mag-administer ng separate properties niya. Kung kumikita po yung separate properties ng abandoning spouse, pwede ikaw mag-administer by court order and you get all the fruits, income of that properties, i-apply mo for the needs of the family, no? And pwede rin i-encumber, pwede rin ka mag-loan, tapos i-collateral mo, tapos hanapan ka ng bangko ng marital consent, then you present the court order that you are allowed to encumber it without the need of the marital consent of the abandoning spouse po, no? Of course, this is necessary for the education, food, clothing, shelter, among others, of the family, especially the children. Totoo nga naman, iniwan mo. Tapos, hindi mo naman siya bigyan ng suporta. So, kung walang walang support, then the properties of the spouses. First will be the conjugal property of the spouse. Pag insufficient ang community property or conjugal property nila, then the separate properties of both spouses shall be solidary liable for the support of the family. Yun po ang important. Kailangan mabuhay po ang pamilya eh. So, those are the things that you should remember. Now, remember that I said you have to conduct due diligence, no? It is the investigation or exercise of care that the buyer is normally expected to do before entering into a real estate sales agreement with the seller. So, tingnan po natin yung seller na yon kasi tapos na tayo dyan sa proof of ownership, know how to verify a land title. You have to know this seller, no? Kasi baka na-fall siya doon sa hiwalay siya sa asawa. Alright? Kasi kapag hiwalay siya sa asawa, tapos hindi siya makakuha ng marital consent, hindi niya mabenta property, you could even advise if you're the buyer na, well, we could ask for a judicial authorization for that. As long as that the abandoned spouse may be able to justify that it is needed for the support of the family. Alright? So, we will continue with the discussion of the loan seller. Thus later on, yung pag-conduct ng ocular inspection, the taxes and legal expenses, and the real notary public. Now, once again, I will tell you that maraming salamat po sa panonood nitong video lectures natin. I hope marami kayong natutunan. So, thank you. Muchas gracias. Danke. Salamat kaayo. And sukran. Thank you very, very much.